Hey, good day, YouTubers and do-it-yourselfers. Today I am doing some 70,000 mile maintenance on my Cadillac Escalade, and oftentimes when I want to check on a procedure process, I'll check the Haynes book for maintenance on a vehicle, or any kind of service pages or forums. In this case, taking it to the dealership to take $1,500 to $1,700 to do some simple tune-up maintenance that you can do yourself at home with limited tools and a moderate skill level. You can do these yourself and save yourself a pretty good bundle. So this particular vehicle is a 2010 model. It is an all-wheel drive, and I'm going to do front differential fluid change, rear differential fluid change, transfer case fluid change, and the transmission fluid change. Also going to change the cabin filter, and I'm going to drain and fill the coolant, Dexon 6. So I've already done the brakes on the vehicle. This is four-wheel disc brake. I did Bosch with new calipers, new brake pads, Brake Best Select from O'Reilly's. Also already done oil changes, so that will not be covered in this video, but let's get started. I'll show you some of the things we're going to use today. So one of the first things you want to do before you really even get your vehicle up on jack stands or ramps, and hopefully you would have already done this, but check your owner's manual looking at the fluid recommendations. Now you can go to the dealership, you can buy all the OEM parts and all the OEM fluids, but I did an upgrade. I'll show you here in the next clip which fluids I decided to go with. I've got the 2010 manual, and then I've got the 2007 manual when I owned an '07 Escalade. It's the same generation. All the components are the same. The only difference is that was a two-wheel drive model. My 10 that I'm working on today is an all-wheel drive model. So I know that the things I'll look at, I've already done my oil change. That part is complete. I use Mobil 1 5W30, and I usually use a Fram or a Mobil 1 high quality oil filter. And of course I always do the Mobil 1 synthetic, a little higher viscosity with the oil. And so the engine coolant's a 50-50 mixture of Dexcool. I'm not doing anything with the brakes. I've already completed my brakes, and so I didn't change calipers. There was no need to open up the brake lines and bleed the system and add new fluid. So that's not a task I'll be doing on this. Top it off with washer fluid. Your power steering system has power steering hydraulic fluid, and that's a closed system. I'm not doing anything with it. You might want to check it and just make sure that it's topped off. ATF is your automatic transmission fluid. Dexron 6. Key lock cylinders if you decide that you want to do any lubrication, although everyone uses keyless entry, so not really an issue to worry about that. Chassis lubrication, I might go do that on another video, but there are some lubricants that you can use, and then you can find on some of the service websites and forums the locations that you hit with chassis lubricant. Keeps the vehicle from getting too tight. Probably want to do that maybe about 75,000 to 100,000 miles. So I'm going to do the front and rear axle with diff fluid. I'm using a 75W90 synthetic axle lubricant. I'll show you what I use for that. Also going to do the transfer case with a Dexron 6 ATF. The hood hinges are fine. Body doors you can lubricate. Rear tailgate you can lubricate. You can put the silicone grease on the weather stripping. And if you have any squeaks, you can also lubricate that as well. Now I like my '07 because of the maintenance schedule. 25,000 mile, 50,000, 70,000. A lot of the things that you would do at 100,000 and 50 would be your air filter. Now I've already done the air filter. I will open it up and show you how to replace that. It's very simple. 3 screws, drop in, and I opted for a K&N air filter. Changing the ATF fluid at 100. Most of your maintenance is at 100. In fact, at 75, which is about where I'm at,
not really much needed there except for everything that was back at 50,000 miles. I've just put new tires on it, so I have Bridgestone, I think 50,000 mile tires on it, so I'm good there until I get to 100,000 miles or more. So I'll show you the fluids that we're going to use, but check your owner's manual. So double check your fluids. GM's pretty straightforward. You can mix and match. Just make sure that you stay with the same weight of lubricant, like a 75, 90. So I'll show you the fluids now. All right, so if you can't tell from what we have here to do our service that I'm a Royal Purple proponent, I am. I do like Mobil 1. I do like official GM lubricants, parts, and things that you can't get off label. But to me, Royal Purple is higher quality. It's proven. It's a better viscosity, and as long as you're matching your weights, you get better performance. When I've used Royal Purple in the past on my other vehicles, the transmission seems to shift cleaner. Throwing it in reverse, I go into tow mode, and it's a difference. It's noticeable enough. So wanted to upgrade that. So we're doing 6 quarts of the Max ATF Royal Purple to do the transmission change. The axles on your differential, it causes for 2.5 quarts according to GM. So we're doing the 75/90. So I'll have 5 quarts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2.5 for the front, 2.5 for the rear axle. And then for the transfer case, you can use Max ATF. Their tech support says that the Max ATF is compatible for that vehicle. However, the Synchromax, a little bit higher viscosity, and it overall from other users in Yukon, Tahoe, and Escalade, the Synchromax hands down perform better. And if you want to save a buck, you can do the Max ATF, but a few bucks more, go ahead and get you a couple of quarts of the Synchromax. It only takes, I think, 1.5 quarts. So I'm also going to change the cabin filter. I did go to the dealership, pardon me, the stealership, because this thing was 45 bucks, and get an AC Delco, not much to it, cabin filter, but we're at 75,000 miles. It'll give the car a fresh smell. I think it's probably time to go and switch that out. 5-6-year-old vehicle. Now, I did already do the primary air filter for the vehicle, and so once we do these fluid changes, and then I complete the engine coolant, I decided to go with 3 of the 1-gallon containers of Dexcool. So I'm going to do a drain and fill on the engine coolant. Now again, I mean, you can go to the dealership. It's $1,500 probably to $1,700, at least that's what I was quoted. I did the same service on my 07 Escalade. I also did the same service on my 08 CTS. It's not worth paying that much money when you can do it yourself. Now when you get into things like changing out a serpentine belt or timing belt, that I definitely would involve the dealership. I think it's worth the headache of not having to break your arm, damage a pulley, or rip a belt, and just have them do it. But on all these other components, it's going to make a difference. You're going to notice the vehicle shifting better, it's going to perform better, and it takes care of it and keeps your car running for many years to come. So now we'll get started. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is locate the front differential, obviously dead center between the passenger and driver side wheels. And what we're going to be working at here is the fill plug, which is right here, and then the drain plug here on the differential. So I can't stress enough the importance of removing the fill plug first. If you can't get the fill plug off and it's locked shut, you don't want to have already drained the casing dry, then you can't drive it to a shop or to a mechanic that can correct it. So start working on this first. And what I did is I used some liquid wrench, coated around the unions there where the metal meets, and then I use a breaker bar in order to break it loose, and then just a regular 3/8 inch socket. This is an 18 millimeter bolt, so you want to pull that plug out, I'm using an 18 millimeter. The lower one is a 13 millimeter. And then once you've cracked them loose, you want to position your drain pan directly below and just let it flow. Maybe give it 5 or 10 minutes to completely empty out. We'll go ahead and do that now. So now we've got the fill plug off. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. And switch out my 18 millimeter for my 13 millimeter. Always a good idea to position the pan a little far out. That initial release of the plug, you get a pretty good horizontal stream. Have some paper towels handy. It usually makes a mess. Okay. And as you can see, the plug is magnetized. So on the tip, you're going to see all the gunk that's collected in the reservoir over the life of the vehicle or since the last change. And we've got some pretty good metal shavings in here and gunk. So while the differential is draining, I'm going to go ahead and clean the plug off. I will actually take a brake cleaner and spray it just to be a little thorough, wipe it down good, wash it off so that way there's no leftover chemicals or solvents on it. But you want to get all this old stuff off while the differential is draining. Get it nice and clean. So we'll let this drain out for another 5 or 10 minutes, get all the old stuff out, and then we'll start the filling procedure. Okay, so we got our plug clean. Actually did not need to use any type of brake parts cleaner or solvent. All came off pretty well. Good idea to probably remove the factory thread sealant. Take a small flathead screwdriver and you can clean out the threads behind this plastic washer, because you are going to want to add a little pipe sealant on there. Show you what I used before you finally put the drain plug in. So what I'm going to do now, the manufacturer calls for 1.5 quarts for fill capacity. I bought extra because what I like to do when I'm getting everything finalized is I like to pump a little extra in there first to clean out some of the old. So again, just to reiterate, a 75 weight 90 gear lube. I'm using the Royal Purple, and I'm going to go ahead and start. I've got my my pump apparatus put on. I've got the fill tube going through the top of the drain filler hole. So I'm going to go ahead and start pumping now, and you'll see the fluid as it goes up. And what I want to see is some fluid coming out of the drain. There we go. Just want to get some of that old out. To me, I think it's worth using a little extra just to make sure that you got clear fluid in. Looks like it's going in there. It's actually already coming out pretty clear. Pump a few more times, and then we're going to let that drain. I'm going to put on my pipe thread sealant and start pumping. It's a long process. You can get some automatic pumps that will make the job go a little faster, but it's a good workout. Just to at least get it pumped in there and know that it's full. You want to do it slowly because as it starts to fill, you don't want it to just overflow.
So now we go on and start filling. Okay, before I put the drain plug in, I kind of want to show everybody at home what I've done. I use a rector seal. This is a pipe thread sealant. It's good for a lot of different applications. It's good for natural gas, plumbing, high PSI rating. It works with other chemicals and fluids. This is also recommended on marine applications. I've used it on my power steering systems, which deal with a high viscosity hydraulic fluid. And the idea is you don't want a sealant that, if it does get into your reservoir or into your system, that it's not a contaminant that will cause operational failure. So I go ahead and take the sealant around the bolt head end of the threads. You don't want it up here for the magnetic end that's going in, because you don't want it to be a contaminant willingly into the reservoir. And then we put our plastic washer back on. So now we have some pipe sealant at the end, and we can go ahead and put the drain plug in. Now once this is done, I'm going to go ahead and get your torque wrench ready. You don't have to use a torque wrench. The manufacturer torque specifications calls for 13 pound-foot on your tightening. So again, if you don't have a torque wrench, it's an inexpensive but very handy tool to have for many applications. I set my rating to 13 pound-foot. Get my 1/2 inch to 3/8 adapter. Okay. And we just tighten it clockwise until we hear our torque wrench click. And there we are. So now our drain plug is tightened. You don't want to over tighten it. Sometimes the torque wrench lets us know if we've got too much strength or too little. We don't want to crush the washer where it compromises the seal, but we also want it tight enough where it doesn't leak. So now that the drain plug's in, the old diff fluid's out, I got new fluid going in, I'm going to start pumping. So we'll resume as soon as I get it filled to the top. All right, so you've just finished pumping. You should have gone, you've got the 2 quarts, if you're using Royal Purple or another brand, and the straw, the feeder straw that's on the pump apparatus doesn't get quite down to the bottom of it. So by the time you finish pumping and you switch to the next container, the next quart, you're going to end up with about half of your fluid left. And the fill capacity on the diff, according to the manufacturer, is 1.5 quarts. So you can go through the fill hole, stick your finger down in the reservoir, and get a little bit of the fluid. That tells you that it's near the top. You don't want to underfill it. That can be an expensive repair. Not enough oil to lubricate the axles. And then you don't want to underfill it, or excuse me, overfill it, where it's. I know some people say just fill it until it pours out of the top. That's not good either. You want the 1.5 quarts to be as precise as possible, and so you've got the 2 quart container. So you're just going to do a full 1.5 quarts. Real simple. Take your fill plug, or your top piece fill plug there. That's the 18 millimeter. Make sure you've cleaned it off good. And go ahead and put that back in there. I usually take a paper towel or something and clean the shaft that goes down in the reservoir. Sometimes there can be some of the old fluid in there as a contaminant. And we're going to hand tighten it. And then we're going to go ahead and have our torque wrench ready. Same thing, 13 pound. Let me put my extension on. A little tough to navigate around some of the linkages, so we'll get that in there. We've already hand tightened it. I've got it set to 13. It starts to snug more.
I'm going to push our torque wrench until it clicks. Now we're done. So that's it. Easy as pie. Saves a couple $100, a few quarts of fluid, 15 minutes in an afternoon, and you're done. So now we're going to move further back on the vehicle. All right, so further back, about midway on the vehicle, we're going to find the transfer case. And this is pretty straightforward. Just to go back a little bit, help you identify it. You've got the linkage on the drive shaft that comes to go back to the rear axle. And like I said, pretty straightforward. You've got a drain plug and a fill plug. And as I said before, always start with the fill plug. Make sure you can get the fill plug off. Doesn't do you any good if you drain the case and you can't fill it up. You can't fill it from the bottom, you got to fill it from the top. So always start and make sure that you can crack the fill plug. What we're using is just a standard 3/8 inch drive socket wrench. I put an extension on because this is a nice wrench. I don't want to damage it. Pop it in. Let me extend, get a little leverage. And there you go. That's it. So I know I can get that one loose. Make sure I can also get this one loose. Yep, and that one came loose. So now what you'll see on here, you come in a little closer, you'll see some pipe threading. We are going to put some threading back on to make sure that our case is nice and sealed. So let me get these off. The next thing you're going to want to do is to position your drain pan below. Go ahead and continue with removing the drain plug, which I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Position your case so that you're going to expect a kind of a horizontal stream to come out for a moment as all the fluid releases. I'm going to do the rest by hand. And there we go. I'll let that drain for maybe about 5 or 10 minutes, get it all out, and then we'll go through the fill procedure. Alright, so we've given it about 10 minutes or so to fully drain the case, and it took some time to, as you can see, you've got two plugs on the drain and fill. We want to get as much of the thread sealant, pipe sealant from the last job that was done on it. You don't want to be too aggressive with getting it out. It's okay if you don't get all of it out. You don't want to damage the threads and then you can't even put the plug back in, or risk potentially stripping the case, and then you got a real problem on your hands. So same thing I did for the front differential. I'm going to be using Rector Seal T+2 multi-use pipe thread sealant. I'm going to seal around, not the inner threads that go to the inside of the case, but about 3/4 of the way in from the outside. I'm going to do that on both. But before I seal, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of pumps because I want to get a little bit of the old fluid that may be out. Now I'm using the Synchromax by Royal Purple. It's a manual transmission fluid. You can use ATF. I've got the Max ATF from Royal Purple. The Synchromax costs a little bit more, but it's going to perform better. And I've had friends and read reports where they did notice a difference in the Synchromax over the standard ATF fluid. So we're going to go ahead and put our fill hose in. And start pumping. Here comes our fluid. After about 4 or 5 pumps, we should start to see some coming out. There we go. You don't want to waste a lot of it. Maybe once you start to see it come out, a couple more pumps. It's already running
the same color as my clean oil. So while that's doing, I'm going to go ahead and seal my pipe threads on my plug. This is safe if it does get in the case to not be a contaminant or cause any harm. This is the same fluid, like I said previously, I've used in power steering applications on boat steering, natural gas, other things. It's a really good brand to use. So I'm going to put that on. Like I said, a little goes a long way. But I want to get enough on there where it does the job. Like that. So we're looking good. Okay. Set that out of the way. And then there are a couple turns where it's going to catch. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my socket ready. Do a couple of things here. I'm going to snug it on. And I'm going to use my torque wrench. You don't have to use a torque wrench if you don't have one. It's recommended. And for the money that you're saving of not taking it to the dealership, you should be able to go out and get you a torque wrench that you can use in the future. Okay. I've got it snugged on. My torque wrench specifications, or rather the manufacturer specifications that I'm going to set on my wrench, is pretty much the same on all these cases in the vehicle, and that's 13 foot-pound. So I've already got my torque wrench set. Kind of see. Okay. It's going to click when I get it in there at 13. 13 is very light, but we want to make sure that it's sealed. And this will probably do it here. There we go. All right, so we're in there good. Get a little bit of the excess that's off. So now we're ready to fill. It's a long process. There are some mechanical pumps that can pump in. You don't want to fill it too fast. You don't want to overfill it. You don't want to underfill it. It's not that big of a deal to just pump it by hand with a manual pump. There's a little more gratification when it's done anyway. All right, so we're going to continue this. I'm going to finish this quart. I'm going to break into the second quart. You got to get 1.5 quarts in here. So you're going to have about a little less than 1/2 quart left after you're done, because the feed straw from the pump apparatus does not get all the way to the bottom of the bottle. So when I get done with this, I'm actually going to pour it into that, so I have everything together. But I did waste a little with pumping some in to get a little of the old fluid out. So I'll have, when I'm finally done, I'll have about a little less than 1/2 quart. All right, so I'm going to do this, and then we'll continue when we're all finished up. Okay, so I did get a little too much fluid in. I've been giving it about 10 minutes to drain out. Stuck my finger in there a little bit to force some of it. While that's happening, we're going to go ahead and do our pipe threading. And one thing I didn't mention is if you use the Synchromax, this manual transmission fluid, it's very, very sticky. It would behoove you to wear gloves. This is not the kind of thing you want to spend the next 48 hours getting off your hands.
And again, not going too far to the inside. Keep contaminants out of our case. Hand turn it a few times. And have our torque wrench ready. And I've already set my wrench to 13 pound-foot on the torque. Just about there. Yeah, that's it. And the click means we're done. Try to get a little bit of the excess off. And there you have it. Transfer case fluid swapped out. When I do that manual shifting there, that should make all the difference in the world. There you have it. The dealership loses again. So now we're going to move to the back of the vehicle and get that rear diff. Okay, now moving on to the rear differential. Gets a little messy here. Why on earth GM didn't have the sense of mind to put a drain plug down here, just somewhere? No, you got to open the clamshell up of the case. There's 5 bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You want to loosen these bolts. Before you do that, make sure you can get out the fill plug. Don't want to drain it until you know you can fill it. This is a 3/8 inch drive, so you want to put this in here. You might have to use a breaker bar. It's a little challenging to get to, but you want to loosen this first. And then once you've done that, loosen, do not remove the bolts here. And you're going to take some kind of a pry tool. I have just like a little panel popper. It's got a nice little 90-degree angle. I'm going to stick in here just enough to allow it to open up. There's a rubber gasket. You do not want to damage the gasket, or you'll be removing the entire differential casing to put a new gasket in. So be careful once you've loosened that up to be able and get something behind there, and the fluid's going to come out really on all sides. Make sure you have your pan, have some paper towels ready. So we'll get started now. All right, so we're going to go ahead and remove our fill plug. I'm using a 3/8 inch drive. This has got an adjustable shaft on the handle for leverage, and then the head pivots, which is handy for me to get in this angle, because it really is a tough angle getting around this rod. I did spray some liquid wrench in there to loosen it up beforehand. And voila, comes right out. This was a northern car, so it's got a lot of rust where it was previously driven. All these parts can kind of be shut and locked in. All right, so now we have our fill plug removed. There's a little bit of gunk on there. Not too bad. We'll clean that off. And now we're going to move on to our 5 bolts. Let's see what kind of luck we have here. Even though you're loosening these bolts, it's been clamshelled pretty well on the rubber gasket, so it's going to be in there pretty good. You don't want to remove the screws all the way, just enough to get that fluid out. And I think that should be good right there. Alright, so I actually had to go ahead and loosen another couple of bolts on each side just to get it to come apart. it was locked tight with rust. So I've got that apart. I've used a just a little bit of a pry tool scraper to get some clearance in between, trying to not move the gasket around. It's a bit of a process. There's a point over here that extends that you can get a tool up under, and I mean, it's just a matter of patience and having to wait for all the fluids to come out. So you might could leave this for a little while and come back to it. I can see that the fluid is pretty dirty, so looks like it's all coming out. I haven't moved the gasket any, so just because of GM's decision to not put any type of a drain plug on the casing, it just makes it a little more difficult. Definitely over the front, over the transfer case, so just be prepared for a process and let this come out. Okay, so I've given it some time to drain out. I went ahead and worked on the rear brakes while letting the rest of the casing drain. I did go ahead and remove the bolts. I did notice that there was a red thread locker. Fortunately, I've got some Permatex red thread locker, high strength, that I'm going to use to reinstall these bolts. I wouldn't have ordinarily removed them, but I wanted to make sure I get the casing completely dry. So now that's done, I'm going to crank these bolts back in, torque spec, 13 pound-foot, get the casing sealed back up, and then start adding my fluid. I'll do that now. All right, so we got all of the bolts that we took out back in with red thread locker, torqued them down to spec, and I would encourage and recommend cleaning around the bottom of the casing to make sure that there's no excess fluid. Oops. If you have a leak, you kind of want to know about it before you get it filled up. So start pumping. All right, well, we've got it full. All of our fluid has been entered into the casing, so I'm going to put our plug back in. We cleaned all the crud off. Go back up in here and hand tighten. Okay. And a little cleaning around the casing as we go. I mean, this stuff, yeah, it's unavoidable. It just gets everywhere. All right, I had to step away. I had to get my torque wrench set up. 13 pound, again. I've got my 3/8 inch drive on it. And finagle it in here. And again, we're just going to go until we hear it click. There it goes. So we're good. A little clean up. And you want to come back and maybe take a peek under after a while and verify that you don't have any leaks. You know, with opening the casing with this method, there's always a potential to damage the rubber seal and the gasket, and so just want to make sure that there's no leaks. You check that and verify that there's no drips. And that's it. Rear differential done. Save yourself a couple $100. Dealership didn't make the money, and you're a do-it-yourselfer. Let's go on to the next part.